Hey guys, welcome to another Instagram Live with me, online coach Kim Leggett, and today we are going to be joined by Clean Health Research and Development Specialist Stefan to answer all your questions on the topic of training strategies to maximize muscle hypertrophy. Now, as always, we've already had a whole list of questions come in this morning on this topic, plenty to get through, but as always, as you're watching this live, if you have any more questions that you want Stefan to answer, that you want to know on the topic of muscle hypertrophy, pop them in the comments box and we'll try and get through as many as possible. If we can't get through all the questions today as you're watching the live, we will try and get through as many as possible after the live is posted, and we will get to answering them. Now, we're just waiting for Stefan to come on board. So again, the topic that we are discussing today is training strategies to maximize muscle hypertrophy. And Stefan, who is the Clean Health Research and Development Specialist, is going to come on board to answer all your questions. And also, guys, just in general, just some housekeeping, that if you have any questions that are really pressing on specific client questions in terms of muscle hypertrophy or case studies, try not to ask them, because if they are really specific, it's really hard for us to answer all the questions during this live. It's better if you submit us a DM or even just sort of, comment in the comments box, and we'll try and get through them at a later date. We can't answer everything during this live. So just kind of leave your burning questions if they're really specific to another time where we can get to them. And if not, we will try and get through as many topic specific questions as we can during this live. So, again, the topic is training strategies to maximize muscle hypertrophy, and Stefan is going to be coming on board. Now, where are you guys watching from? I'm actually really interested to see who our audience is today. If you guys are from Australia, you guys can give us a wave. All right. All right, Stefan is just logging on, guys. Hey, Stefan, how are you?
Hey, Kim, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So I was just telling everyone that the topic today is training strategies to maximize muscle hypertrophy. And this is
my favorite topic.
I was going to say, this is your forte, so we are talking to the
right
man
yeah.
for the topic. All right, I'm going to jump straight into it because I know there's going to be so much detail to all of these questions. So the first one is, what is the difference between training for hypertrophy and training for strength?
Well, I guess in a nutshell, it's probably the intensity zone or spread in which you train across. Okay. So strength is more of a specific adaptation, which requires the use of heavy loads, because there's certain both structural and neurological adaptations that take place in the muscles, in the tendons, in the nervous system, that happens when we lift heavier loads. Mm-hmm. So pretty much for strength, we need to lift heavier loads. Whereas for hypertrophy, the absolute load is not as important, because those last 5 or so reps that bring you to the point of failure, whether you're doing 10 reps, 15, 5 reps, 20 reps, the effect of those last 5 reps in terms of exhausting, in terms of recruiting and placing those high threshold motor units under tension, it's quite similar. So if you look at for strength, the literature clearly shows for advanced lifters, heavy loads above 80% of 1RM produces the best results, which is usually 5 reps or less for most people. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you look at for hypertrophy, you can get, on a set-to-set basis, you can get similar hypertrophy from 5 reps anywhere up to 30 reps on a set-to-set basis. Now, once we start going below 5 reps, we're not accumulating enough volume, so tend to get a less, on a set basis, on a per set basis, tend to get less hypertrophy. So you need to do more sets to make up. And then once the weight or load gets too low, because of central fatigue, you get to a point where those last few reps, even if you're going to failure, you're not really sufficiently recruiting those highest threshold motor units, because you're incurring excess fatigue. So for hypertrophy, for strength, the optimal intensity zones may be between 100 to 85% of 1RM, whereas for hypertrophy, we can train anywhere from 85% up until 40% of 1RM. It's a much broader intensity zone. That's probably the main difference.
Okay, amazing. Now, this may really seem like a simple question, but can you please explain what progressive overload is and how does one use it in a training session?
So progressive overload is probably one of the most important concepts in any training program. And basically it means that whatever you did today, your body will adapt to that level of stress, and and upregulate its basically adaptive reserves and capacity. So the next time you repeat that same workout and you lift, let's say, the same weight for the same number of reps, the body's now accustomed to that. So if you repeat that exact same workout, doing the same reps, same weight, what's now happened is you're not giving a reason for your body to progress beyond that.
Right.
So what you need to, in essence, do, progressive overload, entails each workout, or depending on, I guess, the person. For an advanced lifter, it's not really realistic to progress every single workout. A beginner can, in the beginning, usually it's quite easy to increase your loads or reps each workout. But, even for an advanced lifter, you want to, over time, your loads or reps with a given load should be increasing. That's what progressive overload is. It's you're forcing in some capacity, whether it's more reps with the same weight, or whether it's doing more weight for the same number of reps, you want to force your body to do more work. That's what progressive overload is.
Yeah. And so I heard and I've read, I think that it's about like a 2% increase that you should sort of be aiming for in terms of each workout to be progressing. Is that sort of a right idea, or is there no percentage? It's just as long as you are progressing?
That's a good indicator. So 2% is roughly about 1 repetition. So if you can add 2% to the bar and do the same number of reps, or you can do an extra rep with the same weight at your next workout, that's a sign of that you've progressed. Now, a more realistic, I guess, number that you can look at it is you probably find maybe out of 10 workouts, if you can progress 7 workouts, that's good. 2 workouts, you might stay the same, and then 1 workout, you might go backwards.
Okay.
So that's okay. If every now and then it's all right, it's normal to have a bad workout. Maybe you have a lot of external stress, maybe you didn't get good sleep. But usually what I find is if I'm on a program, or if I have a client on a program, if 2 workouts in a row, they haven't progressed, or I'm even seeing a regression in their weights. So let's say 1 workout, they don't progress, and the next workout, they regress. That's usually a sign for me to move on from that program, that they've adapted to it, and maybe even start now to show signs of overtraining. So potentially I need to back off and deload.
Yeah. Now, in your what is... Sorry.
Just one more thing as well, and that's when you get to really advanced lifters that are nearing like the ceiling of their potential, the 2% rule becomes more like 1%.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must be the case that what you said before, where the more advanced you are, you can't necessarily be pushing yourself each workout, because it's your capacity and your intensity that you're working at is already at a peak, or it's already, you're pushing your max efforts.
Correct.
So the next question is, what do you reckon is the best body part split for hypertrophy?
The body part, I think that really depends on training age, to be honest.
Okay.
So for a beginner, for example, someone who's trained less than 3 to 6 months, the way to go would be full body, 3 days a week.
Okay. Yeah.
Because a beginner doesn't have the capacity to tolerate a lot of volume. 3 to 4 sets per body part in a session is sufficient volume. There's actually evidence to suggest going beyond that leads to worse response than trying to do than keeping it at 3 to 4 sets. Now, 3 to 4 sets is not very taxing on the body or the nervous system. It's quite easy to recover from that, so you can hit the body part more frequently. Now, after 6 months or so, 3, 4 sets may not be optimal workload. You may need to go up to 5, 6, up to 8 sets or so. In that case, you might go into a 2-way split. So when you're using a 2-way split, you train half the body in one session, half the body in the other. So for example, you could do like a push-pull split, like you train all the pushing muscles one day, pulling muscles on the second day. You can do upper-lower split, where you train upper body one day, lower body next day. You could do what's called a torso limb split. So you train all the torso muscle groups on one day, like chest, back, shoulders. You train the limbs on a second day, so like the legs and arms. Or you can do what's called a big small split, where you train all the big body parts, like let's say chest, back, quads on one day. And then so you do 2 workouts like that for the week. And then you train the smaller muscle groups, like the shoulders, arms, hamstrings, calves on the second day. So that's an easier workout. So there's different ways to split it up. It really depends on what weaknesses the person has and what they want to emphasize. But generally for the intermediate, a two-way split, hitting each body part twice a week seems to be ideal.
Okay.
And then if you're looking at an advanced person who might now need to be getting up to like 10 sets per body part to optimize hypertrophy, you probably need to split 3 ways. So like a push-pull legs, or a chest, which is called a synergistic split, or you could do like an antagonist split, which is chest and back, shoulders, arms, legs. And you would basically have a 3-way split, and you would train between, you would train 5-6 days a week, rotating the 3 workouts like that over the course of the week. So it really, I think the volume per session and it really depends on the lifter's training age.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that leads to my next question, which is how much should you be targeting muscles in terms of frequency per week? So if someone has like a weak area, like they want to build their chest, but they're really struggling, how often in a week should they be targeting or hitting that muscle?
That's a really good question. Really good. And I'll tell you why. It's because there's been a shift, I guess, over the last, is in terms of frequency in what we've believed was optimal. There was a few studies that came out probably a decade or more ago that showed if you train a muscle group the next day, there's no further increase in muscle damage, and it doesn't delay the recovery period had you not trained it again.
Okay.
So we took that to mean, well, it doesn't hurt then to train the muscle more frequently, and since muscle protein synthesis remains elevated only for a short period of time, which is typically 24 to 36 hours, maybe up to 48 hours for a beginner, well, training a muscle group more frequently may be ideal to take advantage of the elevated protein synthesis. However, what newer research has shown is that, yes, you don't cause further muscle damage, and yes, you don't extend the recovery period by hitting the muscle again. But what we now believe is happening is, because if you do more, if you extend that thing over like 2-3 weeks or more, what actually happens is there's no increase in hypertrophy. Even sometimes you see regression in hypertrophy.
Oh, wow.
So what we now think is actually happening is, basically, if you still haven't fully recovered, your central nervous system prevents you on the subsequent workout from achieving full motor unit recruitment as a way to, that's why you don't induce any further muscle damage and you don't delay the recovery period, because the body's still in a period of recovery. So even if that extra workout may not hinder your recovery, it doesn't seem to help either. And if you look at the studies on the literature on strength, so for example, in intermediate lifters, going from hitting each body part twice a week to 3 times a week leads to less favorable results. In other words, it negatively or adversely, that extra workout impacts them. Whereas if you have like an advanced lifter going from 2 to 3 days a week, it doesn't really seem to make too much of a difference. So the third workout doesn't necessarily hurt, but doesn't necessarily hinder them either. It's because what most likely is happening is because of what we call the repeated bouts effect. The advanced lift is more resistant to exercise-induced stress, so the workout is not as taxing. They can still recover a little bit quicker for that extra workout, not to tax them, but it doesn't really seem to contribute extra to the training stimulus. So there was a whole last few years, there's been a massive trend shifting towards high frequency, training a body part 3 days a week. Sometimes, certain coaches are recommending up to 6 days a week, training each body part every single day. Now it appears, and I did jump, to be honest, on the high frequency train. There was a while I was experimenting with, training body parts more frequently, like up to 3 days a week. But now it appears that probably around twice a week may be ideal, except in the beginner. The beginner seems to show better progress training a body part 3 times a week. But that's largely because what's happened, I'm talking about strength, not hypertrophy. And largely what happens in the beginning, there's really a poor correlation between strength and hypertrophy. Like a beginner simply gets stronger because they learn how to perform the movement. They learn the skill of performing the movement. They learn how to switch off the antagonist muscle. They learn how to synchronize all their agonist muscles or synergistic muscles to fire together. So there's a large skill and learning component to that. So obviously, greater frequency of practice allows more opportunities for motor learning. So in the beginning, if you're training each lift more frequently, you'll just get better at doing the lift, so you'll get stronger at that lift quickly. Now, for the advanced lifter, most of the increase in strength can be explained by hypertrophy, probably up to about 75%.
Yeah.
There's still neural adaptations, but once someone's really refined their technique and they've improved their neural efficiency, most of the increase in strength will come from hypertrophy. And like I said, in the intermediate and advanced lifters, like highly advanced lifters, a frequency of twice a week appears to be best. And if you look at the literature on how long it takes to recover from a strenuous workout, like when we're looking at about 10 sets per body part, 8 to 10 sets per body part, you're looking at about a 4 to 5 day recovery period.
Wow.
So which is about twice a week, or maybe like, that's why for an advanced lifter, like a 3 on 1 off schedule works quite well. So let's say chest, back, legs, shoulders, arms, day off, and then you repeat that. That could work quite well.
Okay, perfect. So in saying that, this question came in the comments earlier today, which was, are there certain amounts of muscle that we can expect to develop per week or per month for each type of training? So beginner, intermediate, and advanced.
Yeah, look, there's rough guidelines around it. There is, first you got to note, there is a lot of individuality between individuals.
Yeah.
But I think, and there's not a lot of long-term studies. Like most training studies are done in, 3 months. Sometimes some training studies 6, but most training studies are 8 to 12 weeks. So it's hard to extrapolate that to how much can you gain in a year, because obviously there's a law of like diminishing returns. But I think the average lifter, the average like male lifter, over the course of their lifting career will gain about 50 pounds, give or take, of muscle. Wow. So over the course of my lifting, I've probably gained a bit more. I've gained about 25 kilos or so, which is maybe 55, 60 pounds. But most people, let's say, will gain around 60 pounds, or 50 pounds. You could probably gain about half of that in the first year. And then every year you expect to gain half of that. So like it diminishes each year. So by the time you're up to your 4th, 5th year of training, you've probably gained most of the muscle you're going to gain. And you're literally trying to squeeze out little bits of muscle growth each time. That's why, for an advanced lifter, someone pushing the ceiling of their genetic potential, even gaining 1 pound of muscle mass a year, and they get excited about that. Now, I'm talking about proper training. So if you've done everything properly, I've had a lot of clients come to me that may have trained 5 years, but they haven't trained in the most optimal way, and they'll gain, 10 pounds, 10, 15 pounds in 3 to 6 months. But that's because they weren't training in the optimal way. I'm talking about if you train properly, you probably can gain 20, 25 pounds in the first year, and about half of that each year after that. That's kind of realistic result, I think.
Okay, perfect. Now,
and one more thing, women, as far as males to females, women would generally gain similar or comparable rates to males in the first year, and then they will plateau off much quicker. The reason for that is women tend to have less satellite cells. Satellite cells is what contains what helps donate nuclei to the muscle cells, and the nuclei provides a genetic coding for protein synthesis. So women, period, have less nuclei per cell area, so they have less coding for muscle protein synthesis, and because of that, their growth or hypertrophy potential is more capped. So they can gain good in the first year or so of training, but then they tend to plateau off after that.
Right, okay. Well, that brings on to my next question, which is related to women and females. So do you have tips for women who want to build muscle in terms of maximizing their training? Or I guess if you are a coach who knows that your female client needs to put on more muscle, whether it be for a show, how do you encourage them?
Well, just, I guess, firstly, everyone's goal is their own. They should be able to decide what they want and what's important to them. As a coach, what you can suggest is, just from a health perspective, lean muscle has been shown to be the best predictor of lifespan, lean muscle mass and strength. So just from a health perspective, carrying lean muscle mass can help extend your lifespan. So you want to basically educate them on that. Also, even if someone's just more interested in body fat loss, what we know is because you see a lot of the literature on weight regain seems to indicate a lot of people don't just gain the weight they lose, they regain that weight plus some.
Okay.
And what seems to set people up for a rebound, or what we call the slingshot effect, or body fat overshooting, is the degree of muscle loss they experience during the dieting phase. So if you experience muscle loss during a dieting phase, the body seeks to restore the lean mass that is lost. Now, because at that point after the diet, your anabolic hormones are heavily suppressed. If you've just done a hardcore dieting phase, your fat storage enzymes are upregulated, your metabolism has tanked. It's very easy for the body to put fat on versus muscle. So what often happens is the body seeks to restore the lean mass that has been lost, but because it's much easier to restore fat reserves than lean mass, typically you'll tend to regain the fat in the process, and oftentimes plus some. Right. So being able to maintain muscle tissue while you're dieting, so this is what a lot of coaches can advise their female clients that are not really concerned too much about muscle, but they just want to lose some weight. If you can maintain more muscle, or the more muscle you can maintain during the dieting phase, the less likely you are to rebound and to put the weight back on, especially when it comes to overshooting. So I would, from the coach's standpoint, I would advise, number one, having muscle mass improves your lifespan and health, improves your functional capacity as you age. It helps when you preserve lean tissue. It helps you maintain the weight loss. And then you could also educate them on, because, women especially get obsessed with toning. And there's really no such thing as toning. What we can do physiologically is either increase or decrease the size of a muscle. And when a muscle has some hypertrophy, that tends to improve the shape of that muscle. So for females, for example, if they want to have nicely shaped legs, you can just look at the difference between a long distance runner, someone participating in endurance events, versus a sprinter. Now, the reason that sprinters tend to have more developed and better physiques than distance runners is not so much because sprinting inherently creates that, is because sprinters perform heavy resistance training. And because of that, they experience some hypertrophy, and that's what gives them their muscle shape. So if you want to improve the shape of your body, you want to have more rounded and perkier glutes, you want your delts to come out, you want a nice V taper. The only real way to improve that shape, because you could lose the weight, and you can, still look loose and floppy because you don't have a lot of muscle tissue. It's like trying to sculpt a pebble. You can't sculpt a pebble. That's what the analogy is when you're trying to, lose body fat without adding some muscle mass to your frame. So muscle is really what's going to give your body the shape. And for females, it's really about emphasizing those muscle groups that's going to give them a feminine physique. So it's the shoulders, it's the back, it's the glutes, okay? You don't really need to do a lot of women, a lot of arm work with them. They'll get plenty of indirect arm work. You don't really need to do a lot of quad work. Just from the glute work, they'll get plenty of quad work. So if you put the muscle in those areas that accentuates the female's physique, they will look more shapely. They will look better rather than just losing the weight without putting that muscle on. Right. So what you can do is you can also educate them as a coach. Well, look, if you want to improve the shape of your body and how you look, if we add muscle in these specific areas, that's what's going to improve your shape. That's what's going to lift your bum and make you look tighter or so-called more toned.
That's so that way.
That's what kind of I'd be advising coaches working with female clients.
Perfect. Now, you did touch on this a little bit when you meant, I guess the topic leads to what you mentioned before about dieting and losing muscle mass, because a lot of people seem to debate training fasted. So the question is, when it comes to training fasted, what are the benefits in terms of fat loss and hypertrophy, or are there no benefits?
Physiologically, I don't really think there's any benefits. For hypertrophy, personally, I don't like training on an empty stomach because you're going to be more catabolic. You're going to really ramp up those catabolic pathways. So I like to have some, at least amino acids present in the bloodstream when I'm training. So if it's for convenience purposes, a lot of people train fasted because for them, it's just easier to get up in the morning without having to eat and just train, get out of the way, then they can have their breakfast or a shake. So if you're doing that for convenience purposes, probably taking some essential amino acids prior to training, at least will increase amino acid levels in the blood. That will put you into a more anti-catabolic state. That will increase muscle protein synthesis. You can also have like a piece of fruit with that, which is easy to digest. It would help keep more stable blood sugar levels. Also having some glucose in the blood also probably helps make it a little bit more anti-catabolic. And then you can have your breakfast or a shake after you train. So if it's just more for convenience, I would do that. I don't think for hypertrophy there's any physiological benefit at all to training in a fasted state. As far as fat loss, again, I don't think there's a benefit. Think of it this way. Let's say you have to consume 2,000 calories for the day. Well, if you had your first meal, then you trained, you would burn off some of those let's say you have 2,000 calories a day, you have 4 meals and you eat 500 calories at each meal, right?
Yeah.
Just hypothetically.
Yeah.
So if you got up, if you had breakfast, so you had 500 calories, then you did your cardio, you would burn some of that 500 calories that you ate rather than tapping straight into fat stores. But then for the rest of the day, you'd burn 1,500 calories. I mean, so the first day you'd consume 1,500 calories, so you'd burn more fat. Whereas if you got up, if you trained fasted, you did your cardio fasted, you would burn in that point of time, you would burn more fat because, you're tapping straight into fat stores. But then for the rest of the day, you're now going to eat 2,000 calories. So you're going to burn less fat for the rest of the day. And it's pretty much going to even out.
Okay, wow.
If anything, if we're looking at targeting stubborn body fat, what has been shown to be better than fasted cardio is having a high fat meal before the cardio. When you have a high fat meal before the cardio and you have an increase in blood, like fatty acids in the blood, that the presence of those fatty acids in the blood blocks alpha receptors, the stubborn fat receptors. So that allows you to basically mobilize fat from the stubborn fat, the presence of fat. So having a high fat meal is probably more effective than fasting if you're looking at from a physiological reason. Again, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of convenience, then consistency and adherence will triumph anything else. So if someone for them it's easier to get up and train on an empty stomach, whether it's their cardio or weights, and that's what suits you better, and you're doing it for that reason, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you hate getting up in the morning, if you're the type of person, you're not a morning person, you don't like getting up and doing cardio or weights in the morning, but you're forcing yourself to do it because you think there's some inherent physiological benefit to it, there isn't. Okay. There's no need to do it, So it's not right or wrong, but there's no I don't see a physiological benefit to it. It's more if that's what suits you better.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to pick that question that's there in the comments. So the person asked, when fasted, insulin is low and growth hormone is elevated. So doesn't that help hypertrophy? No,
growth hormone is actually a mobilizing hormone. Growth hormone is not anabolic in muscle tissue. Okay. Growth hormone is anabolic in connective tissue and organ tissue. IGF-1, which is the active form of growth hormone, that's anabolic in muscle tissue. But to convert growth hormone to IGF-1 in the liver, you actually need insulin. So fasting is like the worst thing for doing that. So growth hormone alone, not anabolic. Just want to make that point.
Yeah, perfect. There you go. Now, I've got 2 questions in the comments box that I'm going to ask you, Stefan. The first one is, what would you consider overtraining in terms of training volume in number of sets per muscle group?
It's a broad question because it's going to really depend on the volume tolerance on the individual. It's going to depend, and that will depend on their age genetics. It will depend on their stress level. It will also depend on their training age. So whether they're advanced, like I said, in the beginner, 3 to 4 sets per workout may be ideal, and going beyond that probably can be counterproductive. And it will also depend on proximity to failure. Like the closer you train to failure, the less sets you can do. Whereas the further you work away, the more reps you keep in reserve, effectively then you can do more sets because it's less stressful, but then you also need to do more sets to get the extra volume in terms of the effective reps. Okay. So I would typically look, as a rule of thumb, an advanced lifter keeping 1 to 2 repetitions in reserve is probably going to do well on maybe about 8 to 10 sets per body part in a session. Yeah. If they're going for a high volume, if you have someone that likes more of a high volume approach where they want to keep 2-3 reps or in reserve a bit more, they can probably get up to 12 sets or so per body part. If you have someone who likes to smash themselves, go all out and push themselves to failure and beyond, you'd probably be best off capping it around 4 or 5 sets to failure. I think beyond 4 or 5 sets to failure in a workout for a muscle, and you start to see detrimental effect. Like I've certainly seen that in myself. When I take more than 5 sets to failure for a given muscle group, I get worse improvement, takes me longer to recover. So I get worse gains in strength and hypertrophy. Okay, perfect. Now this is the last question from the comments, and the person asked, would you count indirect work as volume? For example, lat pull downs for biceps. That's a good question. It's a very good question. You would, to a degree, but here's the thing. Indirect work, and depends on, here's why this gets complicated, because it really depends on your levers. So for example, if you have someone like me who has very long levers, that means you will more efficiently recruit the proximal muscles, which is the pecs, the lats, the torso muscles. So for me personally, if I don't isolate arms, those compound full range movements, I will not achieve full motor unit recruitment. And if I don't train arms directly, my arms will look like this. So for example, because of the lever length. Now, if you have a shorter person, they have shorter levers. They tend to be more efficient. So when they do pressing, they will tend to more recruit the limb muscles, so more effectively recruit them. So they may achieve just full motor unit recruitment on the triceps just from bench pressing. Just like if you take the athlete or client with shorter levers, if they squat, they can get very good development just from, in their quadriceps, just from squats alone. If I have longer levers, if I squat, my ass blows out. I don't get much in my quads. I need to do leg extensions and a lot of isolated movement. So indirect work is tricky to quantify because it really depends on your mechanics and how much that work is taxing you. So for example, my training partner that I was training with for a long time, who had shorter levers, he barely needed to do any work for his arms because just all the pressing and pulling that we did was enough to stimulate his arms to grow. I had to do but he had to do a lot of extra isolation work for his chest because his arms were taking over on the pressing. So he had to do a lot of isolation on the chest. I don't have to do much isolation on the chest, because my chest is quite efficient. So when I'm pressing and pulling, I get a lot of chest recruitment.
Right.
So great question, but a little bit hard to quantify. If for people with shorter levers, it would count more. So if you have shorter levers, compound movements on the upper body would contribute more to the volume for the limbs. Whereas if you have longer levers, probably less. I wouldn't really count those as full stimulating sets.
Yeah. So does that mean that if you're a person with shorter levers or limbs in general, does shorter levers mean shorter limbs?
Yes.
Yeah. So would that mean that, let's say if we're gonna put someone that is a bodybuilder as the model for hypertrophy, does that mean that someone that is shorter has a higher advantage or a bigger advantage in terms of developing their physique?
In terms of developing their limbs.
Oh, okay, so only the limbs.
Only the limbs, because the limbs are when you have short limbs, they're efficient levers. So when you do compound work, your body always seeks the path of least resistance. So if you have shorter levers and the limbs are short, they tend to be efficient. So your body will more efficiently recruit the limbs when you're pressing and pulling. If you have long limbs, because they're inefficient levers, your body will recruit the proximal muscles. So see, for myself, for example, even close grip bench presses and dips will leave me with a big pump in the chest and delts. Okay. And I still need to do something else on triceps to finish them off properly. It's not enough. Yeah. Or for my quads, even if I'm doing front squats, things like that, my glutes, lower back still takes over a lot. I need to go and do leg extensions to really fry my quads. But like I said, my training partner, for example, or my former training partner, he had the shorter levers. Yeah. He barely needed to do any arm work, but his chest was a lagging point. He had to do a lot of extra isolation on the chest because he had a hard time building his chest. Yeah. So your levers will doesn't mean necessarily more or less advantage. It just determines which exercises you need to do more of and which body parts you need to isolate more. Okay, sure. That makes sense. Now, this is the last question I'm going to take, which is hypertrophy training counterproductive to endurance athletes? For example, if your biceps are too big from hypertrophy, will that make you fatigue faster? That's a good question. What activity are you doing? We're talking about something for the lower extremity. So for example, if we talk about long distance running, just by virtue, the extra weight you're going to carry in your arms will do nothing functional to help you improve running or jumping or any activity like that. So whereas if it's something more like rowing, for example, to a degree, hypertrophy can help improve muscle endurance. because hypertrophy increases strength, and strength is the mother of all motor quality. So for example, let's say someone could bench press 100 kilos for only 5 reps. And if they got stronger and now they can bench press 100 kilos for 10 reps, their endurance actually improved. So to a degree, hypertrophy can help improve endurance, muscular endurance. But, you know, you got to look at, is the hypertrophy in the prime mover, or is that hypertrophy somewhere in an unrelated area? Also, keep in mind, too much hypertrophy when it comes to like things like running and jumping. Too much hypertrophy increases the pennation angle of the muscle fibers. So that means for a given contraction velocity, even though the muscle contracts at the same rate, because it's now at an angle, you're gaining less distance.
Yeah.
So hypertrophy, excess hypertrophy increases fiber pennation angle, which actually reduces muscle shortening velocity in cumulative. So too much muscle size can actually make you slower.
Right. Okay. There you go.
So if it's a runner, yeah, big biceps probably not going to be the most conductive thing to your goal.
Definitely. Now, that's all the questions we had, Stefan. Thank you for your time again
No problem.
on answering the topic, which is training strategies for muscle hypertrophy and how to maximize it. Thanks everyone for watching, and thanks for all your questions as well. Again,
thanks guys.
If you have any more questions, you can always pop them in the comments box after this is posted. We had a lot of feedback today saying that people really enjoyed it. So I think you'll have lots of more questions coming your way, Stefan.
Good to hear.
But if not, we will see you next time. So thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye.